So we're going to move forward with our texturing here on our character. We're going to look at a different approach here to quickly place a base texture map across this character. So I want kind of a nice coverage of some of the rock texture we'll focus on for now as a base, and we want a quick way to be able to fill in any of the gaps. Now we could certainly go in and paint individually all of these rocks. That can take a lot of time to go in and cover all of this character here, of course, all this creature with all these different rocks and things like that. So, and we are going to do a little bit of that because we're going to want to break it up and have different types of rocks or material comprising this character here. But a quick way to fill in a base texture to start with is to flatten to UV space. And the way we can do that is underneath the mesh menu here. You'll see flatten to UV space in there. Now the hotkey for that is Alt-T. So if I hit Alt-T on this, you'll see that we actually get our UV space here. We're actually working with the geometry spread out into our UV shells there, and we can start to paint on this. Now something that actually works well as a visual guide, let's go back out of this for now, is we need something to kind of define how or where we want to put these some of the rocks on here. I want to cover the whole thing, but it'd be nice to have some kind of visual guide to represent where these rocks are. The way we're going to do that is bake out a really low-res, quick ambient occlusion map. And the way we can do that is go underneath our maps, extract texture maps, grab a new operation in there, select ambient occlusion map, and let me just try to fit this into the view here. And we want to define our mesh, the level that we want to put it to. Level 5, the top subdivision level. Level 0 is fine. The quality I've set here, just use the fastest setting. That'll give you for what we need. We're not baking out the final ambient occlusion map right now. We're just using something as a simple reference, a visual guide as we paint. I'm just going to leave it at 1K. The defaults are usually 0.5, 0 for the contrast, and 0.01 on here. I've just upped them a bit. What this is going to give me is a little bit darker shadow, and the filter is going to grab just a few more of the little details. Just a little tip while we're on this, if you want to grab some really tight details whenever you're building out an ambient occlusion map, use the general guide to build out a general ambient occlusion map. Up your quality, start with a low setting just to see what you're getting as your results in there. The subdivision method works great. We're gonna use that. Raycasting as well is the old default method. Subdivision now we're gonna use, and just start with a low map. Start with a 1K to build it up. But just as a tip for when you get to building some final ambient occlusion maps, you can have a general ambient occlusion map. The tighter you put this filter, so you might want to work with something like 0.005 or 0.00 all the way down to 1. Play with those settings depending on the detail you're working with. That'll give you those really tight details, kind of like a cavity map in there. And then I'm just setting this out. I'm just writing it as a JPEG. Remember, we have this tiled out to 6 different tiles. So we are going to write out 6 different maps that represent the different UV shells of this tiled UV layout for this character. So we would hit extract, a box will pop up and I'll write it through, but just in the interest of time, I do have a map here that will display. And what will happen is after you extract the texture map, by default it's going to bring it in as a paint layer, and that's what this is doing here. So you're just seeing this white with the black on here, and then of course in Mudbox we have the ability to blend layers. So this is going to come in as default normal. Hit multiply on that, and it's now multiplying it to your base texture color. Now what this is going to give us, or what this is going to help us out with, again, we don't really care much about how the quality of this map. We're not using it for a final ambient occlusion map. We want to use it for our reference here. So you can see that we're now defining where the rocks are, where the roots are. You can see his face, his head, all the different little details in there. And let's create a new diffuse layer there. I'm going to call this rock base. Leave it at 2K. Remember, we're painting 6 2K maps now. So we use this rock base on here to paint with, and now we can start to work with our UV space. And this is a much quicker and easier way to cover. Make sure you get full coverage on the character as we go. So I'm actually going to drag my rock base down underneath the AO base that I have there, and this way our AO, our ambient occlusion, is going to stay on top of our rock as we paint, so we have that kind of visual representation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my projection brush, and I'm going to use some of these rock maps. We can use some of the ones that we have, the default ones in the tray, of course the Mudbox community, or from anywhere you want. Million great texture sites out there. I've created my own little tile map here. So I'm in the image browser here. From the 3D view up on the top tray, you can bookmark your texture directories, and I'm going to use this tileable rock stencil that I've created, and I've just hit that S key there, and what that's going to do is set the stencil. It's going to drive it into the 3D view and set this as my stencil space here. Now this is a texture that I've created in Mudbox using other textures and different photo references and things like that. And I actually, there are a couple little bonus videos where I show how you can quickly create a tileable map within Mudbox. It's quicker and faster than any other application. It's much faster, in my opinion, than Photoshop to create a tileable texture in Mudbox. If you look at the quick little bonus video I have on how I've created this map and play with that, it's a nice little setup to do that. So let's work with this map here. What I'm going to do is, first of all, kind of set the scale for this overall map on here. With the actual stencil, I can go into the advanced settings here and adjust the visibility on that, right? So we'll bring it up to the full visibility on there. And what I can do is start to paint in that just to see what kind of resolution we're working with there. That's fine, but maybe we might want to tighten that up a little bit on there just so we can get a little more detail in there. And that'll give me for what I'm looking for now. And then what I'm going to do is bring that visibility back down so we have this semi-transparent view of our stencil. And then I'm going to click under the Advanced tab of that stencil, the Use Tiles tab. Make sure Show Tiles is checked as well. So if I check Use Tiles, I've now tiled my stencil across the entire surface. So let's turn that off for a moment. I'm just using this as a reference for the approximate scaling I want to work with. I'm going to bring this all out here so I can quickly paint in this view, and I'm going to bring that map down to the approximate size of that rock I used as my reference for it. That's fine. We'll click Use Tiles. We've tiled this across the surface. We'll work with our brush a little bit bigger. Our projection brush here, I want to make sure that we're up to a strength of 100, and we're working on a new diffuse texture layer there. So let's just start painting on here. So the idea now is I can really quickly fill this texture space as I go along here. There are some areas that I don't really necessarily want to fill. I know that this area in here is the foot of the roots of the trees. You can see the reference on there. It's okay if we're covering some of the roots for now. This is actually the bottom of the foot. That'll be tree later, but for now we'll just work with that. We're going to paint in a different layer later, and we'll just fill this in with this rock texture. I know that that is just tree. I'm not going to bother with that for now. A lot of this is tree up here as well, but let's make sure we cover the rocks. So again, we'll come back and fill in a lot of that texture space for the roots, and this is the hands, and that's the inside of the mouth there. But we'll come back and fill in a lot of that space with just a base simple brown or a different texture here later on. So we want to make sure we filled in all of that space as we're working, and then we can switch back out of that view by hitting Alt-T again. It's going to unflatten from UV space and bring us back into our 3D viewport where we can continue painting on this guy. Let me just frame him in there, and I'm going to hit Q to turn off that stencil. So you can see now that we've covered relatively quickly this base character here with some of this simple texture. Now we don't want to leave him like that. We want to break this surface up a little bit. We don't want to have it all simple same color rock and different things like that. We want to actually break it up. So I can turn off my AO base for now so that we can see the rock a little bit better. And just a couple of things. I'm going to take the erase brush here. I don't really need to be doing this at all right now because I'm going to cover this up with some wood or simple brown base map here a little bit later. But for now I'm just going to take it out with the erase brush. That's fine. We're going to work with that as well. Up on the tree you can see we have lots of roots. We'll worry about that a little bit later on. For now what I want to do is work on how we can break this up a little bit in here. The next video I'm going to get into a little more of using our color correction tools here, where we can go in and adjust and get some different effects in there. But for now, let's just kind of break this up relatively quickly with some different rock textures. So with the projection brush here, again, I'm just going to pick some of these maps that I have that are already in my tray from the Mudbox community. I'm going to turn the tiles off on there. And we'll work with this a little bit larger. So we can start to break up this surface. A nice way to do that, of course, let's build a whole new layer for that so that we always preserve these layers. Again, it's your choice for that. I prefer to go with as many layers as I can work with on here to kind of preserve that. And then what we can do as well is, let's see what fall off, or that's fine. Start to project in some of this overall stencil on this this boulder on here. And then we can start to rotate in, right? So we want to get the undercut of this rock in here just to kind of fill in some of that fall off on there. And you can see how quickly we can start to fill in this texture on here. The UV space texture painting is a great way to start with building your base map up. And then of course you're just using it as just that, a base map, kind of a structure to work with. And then later go in and break it up a bit. So even while we have this texture map on here, let's break up this area here a bit with this one. So we can start putting this in here. Now this guy is really quite gray and blue right now, but as I said, we can adjust these on the fly, some of the hue and saturation here in a little bit. And once we get going, if you have Photoshop, you can at any time grab a channel and fire that off into Photoshop here. So you see export channel to PSD. You'll create a live bridge with Photoshop where you can use all the power and all the tools of Photoshop to quickly adjust or color correct your textures as well. So I'm just going along and filling in these gaps on here, kind of changing up the overall feel of the rocks. I'm just going to do this quite quickly on here. We'll put this guy in there. Just get that edge covered up, filled in with some texture detail. There we go. And then of course, once we really get into the nitty-gritty of painting all these things, we can get right in between those grooves. We're going to do the roots on here. I'm not going to do absolutely everything on here. A lot of this is going to be repeating of the same technique that I'm working with here. But let's use some different materials here, some different textures. So maybe for this rock in here, or this boulder in here, we want to work with something maybe like this. We'll just project that in. Right now I'm mostly looking for the detail on the map. Again, I can adjust the color of it. He is quite gray, so a little bit of brown, even a little bit of kind of bluish rock, some different hues of you know, maybe even some kind of like water damage, kind of greenish rock, even yellow will help break up the color overall. And we can just keep working with these stencils in here. Let's see what else we have. I have another one here that actually has a bit of moss detail. We're going to actually add a separate layer of moss later on. So let's add some of this. This is a nice little rock texture that we can build on here. Just kind of fill that area in with detail. Here we go, and we can quickly go in and keep adding to our overall texture set here. So on this knee, let me build a bit of this across. This kind of granite look in here. And just keep working with these different textures in here as well.